copy of your book here, so I'm absolutely thrilled to see you. So really, first and foremost, I'm thinking for people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Well, originally I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I was working in television, and I had my first episode of psychosis when I was 26. And because I didn't really, I didn't really get the help that I needed, and I had another one several years later. And at that point I thought, okay, I need to find out what's going on here. And so I went on a whole journey to, try to make sense of it. And in that process, I really felt compelled to write my story, to share it with other people, and secretly discovered that I'd always wanted to be a writer. So, so I'm now touring around in a camper van. That's why the light's a bit strange, because I'm actually broadcasting here from a camper van and touring around doing my book tour, which I wasn't able to do during lockdown. And promoting open dialogue, which features at the end of my book, because I never really got the opportunity to experience open dialogue, and it's fairly new. And so I want as many people to know about it as possible. That's me.
Super, so interesting. So when we had a bit of a chat yesterday, you mentioned that you found telling your story was therapeutic for you. So in what way was it helpful to write this book? How did that help you?
Well, first of all, I felt compelled. Like, no one really asked me what I was experiencing during any of the episodes. It was really, diagnosis and just take your medication. And I really needed to tell people about it. So the first time I was in hospital, when I came out, I started writing it way back then when I was 26. And I put it down for a while. And then when I committed to actually writing it, I found that there was lots of like unprocessed emotions. And in order to write something that was palatable to share with somebody else, that was going to be of benefit to them, I had to really process through these resentments and all kinds of things that I felt towards psychiatry, and also emotions that I'd buried really, and I hadn't really dealt with, because it's such a turmoil having a psychosis, and then the process of having psychiatric admission is also traumatizing. So I had to really dig deep in order to bring out the nuggets really that anyone else would be able to make any sense of. And I also, in writing it, I would look back at myself and have all this compassion, like, oh, you poor thing, like, oh, at the time I was just surviving, struggling, getting on, trying to be strong, But then, at this point in my life, I can look back and then go, oh, and give myself like this loving compassion for what I went through. So it was really strengthening as well. And then in the actual publishing, the day it was published, I felt like, I'm quite a small person, but I felt 10 foot tall, like in stature, and my energy just felt like it went out, far out, that I'd reclaimed my story, my version of my life, instead of it being put upon me and labeled. And I just felt like I'd reclaimed myself and presented myself in the way that I was experiencing, and I was like unashamedly saying, look, this is who I am, and this is what I've been through, and healed a shame. It can feel quite shameful having mental health problems and telling people about them. But so I cleared through any shame that I was holding, about having been through all that. And so it was an amazing process to be able to write it and then share it with the world in a book.
So did you know the minute that you started writing, when you first started writing it, did you know that that was going to end up as a book? Or at that point, was that really just you getting it down on paper as some kind of a or did you actually know then, were you like, right now, that's it, I'm going to write a book?
No, you know, it was more unconscious than that. I think secretly I wanted it. Like when I started to write, there was that sort of fantasy of it, but it wasn't really why I was writing. It wasn't like, I'm going to write a book. It was like, I need to write this down. And I also kind of had, you know, ideas about being a writer that were awakened a bit. And no, it was really mostly just, I've got to get this off my chest. I wanted to tell people what an awful time I'd had. You know, that was the initial motivation, was like, oh, I've been to hell and back, and I really want to tell you about it. Yeah, that was mostly it. But secretly at the back there was like, I want to be a writer.
Yeah, well, because I've been reading up about you, and I read about your poem that you had published when you were much younger. About your pony, which was just so adorable. So I think there always possibly has been that writer in there. And
definitely. And at school, like, often the teacher would read out what I'd, you know, a short story I'd written or something. And then even at university, you know, the opening paragraph of an essay. And yeah, so I think I have an innate talent. And then, you know, I studied English, so I've studied literature, and then in writing I've been developing the skills of a writer, because, you know, everybody makes similar mistakes at the beginning, and just developing that skill to be able to actually write something that's publishable. But actually, I actually married a writer. I think I wanted to be a writer that much that I vicariously, you know, I married a writer in order to like I was so in awe, like, oh, you're a writer, you know. And then I saw like it was so possible. He had his memoir published, and I was like, that's so possible, that's so doable, you know, give me the reins, I want to do this.
So did you get some handy hints then when you were married about that?
I think what I saw was the process of what it takes to get a book, you know, put into the world. It's hard work, and you have to dig really deep, especially if it's a memoir, because you can hide yourself in a novel, you know, but in a memoir you've got to dig deep, and you're there bringing it all up all the time. So I supported my husband through that process, because he was having to reach into his past, and at the end of the day it's like, oh, this icky feeling of you've just relived it all. So I think I got a really good sense of what it was like, but also the glamorous bit once it was published. I mean, he was a lot more high level because he had an agent and a publisher at the beginning. You know, they actually gave him an advance to write it. So he was on Radio 4 and all this, and I was like, oh wow, that's, you know, I was so proud of him for doing that.
It's fantastic. So this is your first book, as we've said.
Yes.
And what was it like for you going through that process, like finding a publisher? How did that work out for you?
It was really difficult to begin with. Like, I spent about 6 months looking for an agent, and I got so many rejections. I actually felt despair at the end of that, and I dropped it. I dropped the book for about a year, and I had to go through a process to work out whether I was going to continue with it and what I was going to do with it. And it was a really good process, because I admitted to myself that I only wanted a publisher to validate me. Like, was it good enough? You know, if I had a publisher, it meant I was good enough. So I realized, no, this book is good enough and it needs to be out in the world. And I decided I was going to self-publish. And it was in the process of that I asked Dr. Russell Razak, who is a psychiatrist, who's introducing this new form of mental health care called open dialogue into the NHS. I'd been filming for him and I knew him already, and I asked him, would he write the foreword? And he said, I'll read it, because I get lots and lots, I can't make any promises, I get lots of people asking me, because he's a published author as well, you know, he's got a talent for writing. And when he'd read it, he said he couldn't put it down. He wanted to stay in it longer, and he thought it was so good, he wanted to help me find a publisher. And he knew he knew this psychiatrist who'd set up a publishing company. And so he put a good word in for me and made that connection. And I pitched it to him. And he said, oh, yeah, definitely. I'm really interested. But you've got really big ambitions for it. So why don't you try and find a bigger publisher and come back to me if you can't find one? So then I spent another 6 months looking for a publisher this time, and despairing, not finding one. I'd forgotten about contacting this guy. And then I'd finished that process. I was like, oh, right, actually, no. I remembered this guy, and I contacted him and said, hey, are you still interested? And he said, oh, no, we've just been bought out by another company. And he said, but I've got some clout. I've got some clout with him, and I'll put in a good word for you. And that's how Aeon Books took it on, you know, because he put in a good word, and they said, yeah, okay, we've never done a memoir before. You know, they do like herbal medicine books and alternative therapies. And it was their first ever memoir. But, you know, to show like goodwilling for this company that they were buying, they decided to publish it. So, yeah, that was how it got out into the world in the end.
Wow, what a story. Yeah, and you got there in the end.
I
definitely.
got there, yeah.
And here it is in front of me now. So
is.
Well done, yeah.
Thank you.
So you're out and about. We know you're on your beautiful book tour at the minute. You're down south with loads of beautiful sunshine in your camper van. You're saying it's been super busy today when you've been in the library down there. What are people's reactions to the book? And have you had any surprising reactions?
Most people say similar things to what Dr. Russell Razak said, that they can't put it down and they want to stay in it. And generally, people are expecting a kind of, you know, woeful tale of mental health, but they're really surprised by the quality of the writing. And I've not had any, like, nothing's really surprised me about any feedback, but I always feel this lovely surprise when people bother to send me a message because they've read the book and introduce themselves and tell me a bit about themselves. And then we have a chat and, you know, have all sorts of interesting conversations. And one of them recently led to, you know, this woman, her book's being published in 10 months' time. And she invited me on a sponsored walk, which is going to be part of my book tour, and invited me on this media training, and then is going to introduce me to her agent. So, like, actually making connections has just been invaluable. And yeah, I just love it when people bother to let me know how it was for them and what they got out of it, because that's really important to me.
Yeah. So you talked just before there, and in the book you introduce this really exciting new approach that's been invented in Northumberland called open dialogue. Yeah. It sounds really different to anything that I've ever been aware of before for treating psychosis. Can you tell us a bit about that? Just enlighten us.
Yeah. Yes. Open dialogue. Basically, Finland had the worst statistics in Europe for schizophrenia outcomes. And then it was so bad that this mental health service in Western Lapland actually collapsed under the strain. And a group of family therapists got together and thought, well, how can we do it better? So they were using like family therapy based ideas, and every day just trial and errored it. And now Finland has got the best outcomes for schizophrenia. And that's because they don't ask what's wrong with you, they ask what's happened to you. And they draw on your social network as like a really useful resource of support. And your whole network are involved in the therapy. So you can choose who joins your meetings, and you have the same team for as long as you like. And they're not trained like to diagnose and treat, though that can be part of it if you want. They're trained to encourage all the voices in the room to be expressed, because they see mental distress as some kind of expression of relationships breaking down, communication breaking down, something breaking down, like traumas and stuff that's been going on that's not being dealt with. And so they're basically encouraging everybody to speak. So it can be quite chaotic at first, but once everybody gets airs and gets honest and truthful about what's going on with everybody, and they see the individual not as the person with the problem that there's something wrong with. The individual is just the sensitive person, like expressing what's out of balance in the social network, and they help rebuild those relationships. And they basically kind of, the network of family, friends, they work together to sort it all out themselves, so they actually no longer need the professional help, and they become like the lifelong support, and they raise their awareness about what's going on and what's causing it. And very often the person, they don't call them the patient, they call them the person at the center of concern. And the person at the center of concern may be the sanest one in a dysfunctional family that's showing, you know, that the people talk about things they've never talked about, and they're carrying, you know, and expressing what's going on, that's a bit mad around them, really. So it is a very, very different approach, and it requires a different training. And, you know, that's what I'm involved with promoting.
I mean, it just sounds fantastic. How long did it take them in Finland to get from being where they were to being in such a good place?
I don't know. I know that when I joined it, they'd been doing it for 20 years. So it's still quite new. And it's fairly new in the UK. But I don't know exactly how long. And they're tweaking it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are a few places in the UK that are trialing it, aren't there? Not many, it seems.
Yeah. To begin with, it was just the people who knew about it that got a team together. They managed to persuade their CEO to put some funding into training, and they trained one team scattered around the country. And now Dr. Russell Razak's, he's northeast London, and he's training his whole trust. And he's also got government funding to do a whole trial, like a 5-year trial, because the group in Finland that have been doing it, they were running like monitoring it themselves, statistics and trials and stuff like that. But because they were doing it themselves on their own work, it carries a potential bias. So this trial is a massive coup for Russell, who's managed to get millions of pounds, you know, which was for health, you know, the health minister. And it could have gone to Alzheimer's, it could have gone to anything, and it's gone to this. And if they can show, like in a clinical trial, that they're actually getting as good outcomes as Finland, then it's a no-brainer. You know, the rest of the world who are trialing it as well in small pockets around the world are looking to this trial. And if it's a good result, then more, you know, it's going to go that way, because it's a no-brainer, really, that, you know, that if you get those kind of results, that at the moment, like I haven't got the exact figures, but about 70% of people who are going through the services with the first episode of psychosis here end up within 2 years back in services. Whereas with open dialogue, if it's proved to work, 70% of people aren't coming back to services, and they're working and having a normal life again. So it's a lot of an investment in to begin with, but long term it stops that recidivism, which is so costly down the line.
God,
so it's very exciting.
It is, isn't it? And I can't wait to see when the results start to filter through, and we can see, you know, in these trials how effective it is. So yeah, really, really exciting, and such an exciting thought that in a number of years we'll see that possibly as being much more commonplace as a way of treating these types of things, rather than medicating and in, you know, the more formal types of care. So
And just to be clear, I mean, there is still medication,
Yeah.
but it's it's discussed as a whole group of people, and everybody gets a voice in that and decides how much and for how long. It's empowering them to all make that decision. And it's not, still people do take medication in Finland, but much less and for much shorter time. It's just a little stopgap help. It's not like the be all and end all cure. It's to help with the process along. So it's not anti-medication or let's get it off medication. So
there's less of it. Because you talk about medication in the book as well, don't you? About when you were in hospital and how it was administered to yourself, and it was a really tough time for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't really get any say in it, and instinctively I didn't really want to be taking it. I just had this feeling. I was like, wow, you think this is making me better? It's just sedating me. It's not changing anything. I'm just like a zombie, and I'm still having to deal with everything. And also it means that because we're so dependent upon it, we haven't got a system which takes the time to spend time with you, to talk with you. It's just like, okay, the focus is on, are you taking your meds? Take your meds and lift your tongue up to show that you've swallowed it. And you feel like people are just putting it upon you, and that you've just got to be, I say you, but I say like I've just got to comply and be compliant, because if I don't, it's forced on you anyway. And there's not really a choice not to. And until I'd got enough experience of being in and out of hospital, and I learned how to communicate, and I'd just take it in hospital, but as soon as I was out, sorry, the light's going, I would reduce it gradually. And I'd just tell the psychiatrist to say, okay, so I'm reducing my meds and I'm doing it gradually, and you can monitor that. And, I'm making that decision. But that took me years to have that agency in myself. And it was actually my parents who encouraged me to stop taking it. After I came out of hospital the first time, I really hated it. So they gave me another one. They said, well, why don't you try this? And that was even worse. Like my legs just jammed up and shook like that. It was just trembled. And I was like, I can't live like this for 6 months. And my dad just said, why don't you stop taking it? And I thought, really? And I asked my mum, and she said, yeah, I mean, you're better now. So why would you continue taking it? So I spoke to the psychiatrist, and they said, we don't advise it. You should take it for 6 months, because if you stop taking it, then down the line, it's more likely to recur, and it's going to be less effective if it does. And I thought, well, what sort of drug is that anyway? Like, it's going to be less. Why would it be less effective? If it's effective, it's effective. Why would it stop being effective? And I was also a bit stubborn, really, and thinking, well, it's not going to happen again anyway. So, so I'm stopping taking it, and it's not going to happen again. So I've always had a bit of a battle to not take it, but I've learned to work the system so that it's less of a battle. And I now, I still do use some medication, like in my last episode, which it was last year in the second wave in lockdown. I really struggled the second one. I was like, not again. And I had insomnia. And I didn't want to go into hospital. I didn't want any psychiatric help. And I'm so experienced at it now that I took care of myself at home. I was sharing a place with somebody so they could keep an eye on me. And what I do is I took a quarter of an antipsychotic as and when as a sleep aid, because it's a sedative, and it's preferable to sleeping tablets that are like hammer in the head. And then just tranquilizers, they don't really help me get to sleep. So with help of a psychiatrist here not here, but I've been living in Argentina. Like in Argentina, she taught me why don't you take like a quarter? So I take and I choose to do that now. So I take a quarter of a very low dose, and that helps me get to sleep. And then the next night I don't bother. I'm like, I'll try and sleep. And then if I can't sleep, then I'll try that again. And so I use it as a sleep aid rather than like as a whole 6 months, you've got to live with it and take it for 10 years or whatever. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm quite stubborn, and I've tried all ways, but I still do use it, but very consciously and very sparingly.
Thinking about, obviously you've had such an experience through your life with psychosis. If you could give someone who's struggling with psychosis themselves one piece of advice, what would it be?
I can have one for like different stages. Like,
choose your favourite.
Okay, well, if they were actually experiencing it now, if they were in a psychotic episode, my piece of advice would be connect with nature, lie on the ground, sit under a tree, lean against a tree. I had this experience where I went out for walks every day when I was looking after myself at home. And there was one day where my head felt like like that wool image from the Mind logo. It was like that. It was like, oh, just full of energy, full to bursting with energy, my head. And I sat under a tree. I leaned against the tree. And I could feel, because I feel energy, I'm trained shiatsu therapist, so I can feel chi, and I could feel it all leaving my head and going into the tree. And after, I don't know how many minutes, a matter of minutes, I was breathing and I relaxed, and I stood up, and I felt completely normal again, 100% normal. The pace of nature is just so wise and calm and literally grounded. It's not living in this plugged in, fast, stressed out world. It teaches my body to remember how to just be this calm, relaxed human being. And when I return to that and let my nervous system calm, all of the craziness just fades away. So I would highly recommend that. But I'm going to be a bit greedy and have a piece of advice for anyone who is not in psychosis, but it is a thing that they have in their life. The thing that's really helped me, because I wouldn't recommend this when you're in an episode. Cultivate awareness, like meditation. Become really aware that you're not your thoughts. You're not what you think, what you think is not who you are. Don't believe everything you think. So practice when you're not in a psychosis, because if you are, it's a bit like if you're a surfer and you never learn to surf on dry land on the beach first, and you go out on a big wave in Hawaii, you just wouldn't do it. So don't learn meditation in a psychotic episode, but learn it outside of that. And so you disidentify with all your thinking and emotions and become this awareness around it, like you are a container, and you align with being this container. And so all of this stuff can happen, but you're the container around it. So you don't follow all the thoughts and do the behaviors that the thoughts would lead you to. You're like, oh yeah, I might be being filmed. I might not be being filmed. I'm aware. I'm having the thoughts that I believe I'm being filmed right now. Or, you can just go, oh, I'm thinking this, and be the container around it all. And that really helps when you're actually in a psychosis. If you can just do it in daily life, then when you're in one, it helps just ride it out more calmly and not end up doing strange things that people start getting worried about.
Yeah, because that leads me on to something I did want to ask you, because there is a lot of mystery and ignorance out there around mental health and psychosis.
Yeah.
What do you think the most common misconceptions are that people have, or are there any that have been you've felt most common in your experience?
Well, things that bug me, like, are in the media. When I see the word psycho, you know, they use it interchangeably, psychotic with psychopath. And a psychopath is someone who lacks empathy. And I have a lot of empathy and compassion, and psychosis is about your experience with reality. It's got nothing to do with that. So I hate the ignorance, you know, thinking a person with schizophrenia is multiple personality disorder, and just not just ignorance, really. And the misconceptions that leads to is that there is an us and a them, that you're crazy and I'm someone who's sane, and that there's this, like, certain people go crazy and certain people don't. And that's not actually true, because psychosis can be triggered in anyone. You can actually make it happen in anyone with the right conditions, with insomnia or overstimulation, or like a moral double bind, like something can actually trigger psychosis, or deprivation or neglect. In anybody, you can trigger psychosis. So it's a misconception to think that, you know, there's something wrong with a person, that, oh yeah, it's your genes a bit wrong, or, you know, you've got a brain chemical imbalance and something wrong with you. You're actually responding normally to quite insane circumstances, traumatic life, insane world, insane family, whatever. That a lot of the mental health responses are normal responses to condition, you know, life's conditions, and they're there to teach us if we're willing to kind of look beyond that label and stop separating people out.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. I just wanted to mention, I mean, I could hog you all night, quite frankly, but I can't because there's other people here, but I've got one more question. I just wanted to say, you're currently writing your next book, yes, Tango, yeah. Camino, Romeo. Yeah. I'm really interested to know, how does writing this new book compare to writing My Beautiful Psychosis?
Well, I was hoping it would be easier and more fun.
Yeah.
But in some ways it's a bit harder, because when I was writing My Beautiful Psychosis, I had all this compassion for myself of what I'd been through. Whereas now it's more like a bit embarrassing and like, oh my God, what am I doing? Oh, look how I behave. And I haven't got the same, I don't know if it's because it's more recent. I'm just sort of like, oh no, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And it's really so much harder to pull out of me. And I notice because at my desk at the moment, there's a mirror there. And sometimes when I'm writing, I'm like, oh, and I look in the mirror and my face is like despair, just having to dig. It's memoir, like having to dig deep and relive it all. And so my first book I wrote in the present tense, you know, like it's really immediate, it's happening now. I wrote it in the present tense, and I thought I would get round the emotional difficulties by writing it in the past tense. It would give me some distance, you know. I'm going to write it in the past tense and that's going to help me. But you still have to dig deep and relive it and go through those moments again in order to remember it. So it's proving to be just as difficult. And with the first one, I couldn't really find an ending. I was hoping like I would stop having episodes. I would be able to end the book going, yeah, I sorted everything out and I haven't had any more since. And, you know, but that's not, I had to come up with another ending. That's not how it ended. And at the moment, I'm struggling with the ending of this book. I'm trying to force it one way because I want to tell one story, but life is actually going this way, and I'm having to accept that perhaps I need a new ending to it. And the final difference is that My Beautiful Psychosis, the title came fully formed. Like it was almost like a character that wanted to be called that. This is what I'm called. I'm called My Beautiful Psychosis. But this book, I had to really kind of figure it out and think about it a lot more and work out, you know, how to call it. And I actually did this. I even did like a formula online of, you know, how to title your book, and, you know, went through this whole process to come up with a title. It's had several titles, but now I found Tango, Camino, Romeo. I really like it, and I think that's the right one, and I'm sticking with it.
I think it sounds fantastic, and I cannot wait. So no pressure there, but you know, that would be really good. But as I say, I literally could talk to you all the way through into the wee small hours. However, unfortunately, we don't have that amount of time. So I'm going to say thank you so much, so many squillions, Emma, for your time. And I think I'm handing you back to Diane, who's going to look
Vicky,
for the questions
before
in the
you
chat.
hand me over, thank you, Vicky. Thanks for the wonderful questions.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Right. Thank you very much, both Vicky and Emma, and that you know, very, very enlightening, and that, and I think yes, anything that moves away from a drug therapy and gets to the bottom of what people's problems were and work together, it seems to me like the way we should be going, and I think having the forethought to actually write that down and to say tell your story, I think I'm sure will help lots of other people as well. At the moment I haven't got any questions, and I'm sure that there are. So I think the problem is it's always asking that first question. I think people are always very nervous to sort of but I've got one. Yes, so Sharon has come back with her first question, so in a moment I will find it again. Were there any signs of psychosis before your first episode when you were younger?
I don't think there were any signs when I was much younger, but I do remember the first sign, you know, with hindsight. I was a few years younger. I think I just finished, can't remember if I'd finished school or university, so it was only really a few years younger, and that was from insomnia. Basically, I'd had a long haul flight, you know, and when I arrived at my destination, I just felt weird, and I had this weird feeling, and looking back, I realized that was you know, an early sign that it's how I respond to insomnia, really. But years later, after my first psychosis, I found out that I'd been through childhood sexual abuse, and that's really where I think a lot of it stemmed from. It was a you know, a dealing with that. So although there's no early signs, it was that the cause came from an early, you know, much younger in life. But you know, these often show up in adult life because as a kid, you're just surviving. You're just finding all these coping strategies to survive. And then eventually you just go, okay, let's grow up now and let's find a new way to live. So in a way, when mental health problems occur, they can be an opportunity to question how we are living, question how we are in ourselves, and whether we are being, you know, whether we're taking best care of ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember doing some mental health training and saying how we're all on a continuum, and you can flip from one side to another, and that, as you say, I don't think any of us can be complacent that our mental health will be perfect throughout our lives. I've got a thank you from Beth here, and she said, I wonder if you'd notice any difference in the mental health approaches when you were based in Argentina.
Yes, that is interesting, because I'd heard about World Health Organization studies. Twice they did the same study because they were so surprised by the results. But in developing countries, they have much better outcomes for schizophrenia than in developed countries. And so you have to ask why. And Argentina is a developing country, and for me, they have much tighter families and communities, and there's actually more psychologists in Buenos Aires than anywhere else in the world, and they love talking, and talking therapies are normal. You know, I went out on a date with an Argentinian, and he's telling me about going to his therapist, and I'm, you know, it's a bit taboo still here. I'm like, oh really, what's wrong with you, you know? And but they it's quite normal. So for them to imagine that talking is going to help you and bring you back, is they don't have to take a big leap, you know, of faith to do that. That they already know that, they already have that in place. And I actually have been through the psychiatric system in Argentina, and I saw a psychologist for a year, and so that was a matter of course. You know, you see a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and that just comes with it. There's not a waiting list. That's part of it. You know, that they saw I'm an anomaly in Argentina. They couldn't believe that I'd had so many episodes, because it's rare for them. They're like, oh no, we sort it out. You know, how is it that you've had so many? It's unheard of there. So yeah, great question.
Yes, but it's interesting. Yes, as you say, different approaches and that. So if you hadn't been to it in Argentina, you may not have found out.
Yeah.
Way of how they went.
But they still, I mean, to be fair though, last year, you know, I chose not to use the psychiatric service because she would have hospitalized me and medicated me against my will, so that they still would have that in the actual crisis. You know, there's still that kind of keep you safe, keep you medicated, you know, it's that, but it's around it that's different. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Judy here has another question. Has a question for you. You spoke about processing resentment and shame. How did you do that?
By feeling it, basically. So in the very act of writing about it, it comes to the forefront. And so I was a shiatsu therapist for 10 years. So I've learned to access my emotions, and a lot of them were suppressed. So I've learned to feel them and let them through, and they dissipate. You know, there's an energetic part of an emotion which can be stored in your body, and if you don't deal with it, it will always be there, and you'll be constantly acting to kind of hide it from yourself. So I basically just let them, like, I feel shame, like, just, okay, I feel this is shameful, and just feel it. And then when I go back to write it next time, it's a little bit less, and then it's a little bit less. And processing is really, for me, just about allowing and accepting and being with, and giving myself time to do that, and not forcing myself to write from a different place, like this is it, this is what's happening, and allowing that to pass through. Yeah. And then always on the other side of that is a much healthier, happier me.
Yeah, lovely. I think Judy really appreciated that, so she said that. She's saying thank you.
Oh,
yeah,
pleasure.
Yeah, yes. So, is there any more questions from anybody? And I think, as I say, you've covered a lot of ground with that. I was interested from a library perspective and a publishing, that you didn't in the end have to go down the self-publish line, because I know as librarians and that, we are slightly wary of self-publishing, and because there are a lot of people out there who think they've got the book in them, and sadly they haven't, and I think the publishing process does help to sort of edit and get things into the right format and that. So I'm pleased. So have you managed to get a publisher for your next book?
Not yet. I haven't tried yet, because I've only finished the 4th draft.
Right.
And this My Beautiful Psychosis took 10 drafts actually, but I did get a lot of help with it. In the first draft, I made sure I got help at that stage, so that I didn't make mistakes that I didn't realize I was making, you know, right down to the end. So I actually paid an author to give me feedback, to read my chapters and let me know what I needed to improve. And then even when I thought I'd finished it, I sent it to a literary agency and paid them to, they gave it to one of their editors, who wrote like a 12-page review of it, and I mean, there were so many different subjects that she filled in on, and she said that there's no reason why I couldn't get it published, but it still needs work, and this is what you need to do in order to get it published. And I actually did absolutely everything she said, apart from change the title. She didn't like the title. I understand why, because it's quite a triggering word, psychosis, and there's already a beautiful mind. And she thought I should have a very literary title, you know, like, I don't know, I can never think of one. I just kind of go, oh, when I try to think of one. And I knew what she meant, because I love literary titles, but I also knew that this book was going to sell online. It wasn't going to be in your face in the bookshop. It wasn't going to be in your face on TV. And with a title like My Beautiful Psychosis, it would be a bit in your face. It was going to sell online. So it needed to be like, does what it says on the tin. Yeah. And also it's hashtagable. I mean, psychosis is in the title. So anyone searching is more, that's not why I called it that, but it did cross my mind, like, actually, I'm going to keep this title, you know, respectfully disagree with her. And yeah, so actually it took 5 more drafts after that. And then that editor did another go through, you know, a line by edit, and to make sure that I wasn't going to be ending up with a lawsuit, or I wasn't venting. And I asked her, I said, look, I don't want to upset anybody, you know, that's not my intention. So if you notice that there's any resentments creeping in, please let me know. And, you know, and I also made sure my family got to read it first. And so I took some things out that some people were uncomfortable with. And I also sent it to people who feature in it quite highly to get their okay on it, because I didn't want to put anything out there that was going to upset anybody. And yeah, I'm very proud that I got a publisher, but actually, you know what, I think I might have been able to do more with it self-publishing, because I was a little bit trapped with the publishing machine, as in, you know, they printed 2,000 copies up front, and I would never have done that. I would have gone print on demand, so I could have kept the costs down. So they're a very small publisher, so the price, you know, that they were asking for at the beginning, I was like quite shocked by what they were asking for it. I was like, that's who can afford that? Who spends that on a book, you know? And I would have been able to sell it at a more affordable price for people. I mean, it's come down in price now, but I'm really proud that I got a publisher. But I'm also a bit stubborn, and I like things a certain way. And
that's so, your filmmaker in you, I can tell.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll see with the next book.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, that's right.
But interestingly, what is it because of the editing process then that you're generally not stocking self-published books? Because
well, we do, you know, it's generally across we do get bombarded, and independent booksellers would say the same thing,
right?
And over the years, yes, we no, we're not saying we haven't discovered some gems out there, but I've also discovered some which I think, you know, if only you'd had that edited properly, and that, you know, spelling mistakes, grammatic.
Oh, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, it is difficult in that.
Yeah.
But just as I should make a plug, because obviously we do have copies in stock in the County Library Service, which you can be borrowed. and we also have a link up with Forum Books in Alnwick, and if anyone would like to buy a copy from there, you can purchase a copy from them as well. I believe, now I've got a feeling, had you done some signed labels and that for Forum Books, or am I just making that up?
No, because I've not. No, I haven't. No. That's not happened.
No,
I'm not sure if Forum have got any. Even I think.
If I'm misleading you.
Yeah, I think it might be best if people go onto it directly onto Amazon. If well, especially if they're not near Forum Books.
Yes, of course. Yes, we do know we've got people from around the world, and it's a nice message from Raj in India, and that who's
oh wow
in sharing, and I think.
Oh, I was born in India.
Oh, well, you see, you've obviously got the vibes out to India.
Great.
So I think we're coming to the end of this evening, and that. So I just a big thank you to Emma and for Vicki for bringing this to us this evening, and I think for Emma for reaching out to library services and via email and that, and it's been one that we've picked up and as a gem. So thank you.
Oh no, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great.
Thank you. Right, well, thank you. And so if anyone wants a copy, we will be making the video available. So if you just drop us an email, we could send you a copy, the link to the video. But Emma will also be putting it onto her YouTube channel. So yes, so thank you everybody. And what I have forgotten to say is that at 8 o'clock at the end of this session, you will get a short feedback form, and it'd be great if you could just spend a few minutes just completing it, just to help us as we plan our next events and that. So please keep an eye up on Northumberland Library's regular virtual program, as well as in-person events as well. If you're a person in Northumberland or in the borders, we'd love to see you as well. So thank you again to Emma and to Vicki, and for my colleague Katie, who's been behind the scenes ensuring everything's running smoothly. So thank you very much. And
thank you. Thanks Northumberland for being pioneers.
Oh, thanks Emma. It's been absolutely lush. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see all the new stuff that comes out.